So I just saw Last Night in Soho, tonight in Soho, and it was a fun time. It was a Q&A screening as well with Edgar Wright, and I'll talk about more about that later on in the video. But I just wanted to quickly get out a review just to see how quick a turnaround on a standard movie review that's not like half an hour long of me talking about aspect ratios like I did in my Dune video could be. And so if this goes well and it's really easy, then I can do YouTube way more, which was nice because I enjoyed making the Dune video, and I hope that you guys enjoyed watching it. I really appreciate everybody who watched it and liked and commented on it. The comments are honestly my favorite part. Like, I just love talking to other people about nerdy stuff that only, I really care about in my circle. And so to be able to like share all of that with other people in like different countries and just anywhere, it just makes me really happy. And so I'm going to talk about Last Night in Soho and we'll see how it goes. So, Last Night in Soho was directed by Edgar Wright, and I am an Edgar Wright fan. I've seen all of his movies from Shaun of the Dead onwards, and I rewatched rewatched those movies, Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, this year because they had just come out on a 4K Blu-ray, and so I got to enjoy those again. And those two movies are just great. The World's End, I am not as much of a fan of. I'm not really a fan of that film at all. I didn't really find the writing in that movie to be as, like, it either really hits with you or it really doesn't. And despite the fact that I came from that same kind of club of like the schoolboy banter that kind of Simon Pegg does throughout the whole movie, it just didn't come across like naturally to me or in a way that was like new at any point in the movie. Like, it can be novel for like the first joke, the first time he does it, but that's like the whole shtick of the movie for the entire movie, and it got very tiring for me very quickly, and I did not care for The World's End very much. Even though I couldn't say that any Edgar Wright movie is incompetently made, it's still well presented and edited, and I particularly love Baby Driver for that, and Scott Pilgrim as well. Like, the presentation in those movies. I mentioned in my Dune review that I had seen Scott Pilgrim in a theater this year because they did a 4K Dolby Vision and Atmos remaster of that movie, and I hadn't seen that film since it came out, and I was reminded how great that movie is. It's really fantastic, and I have that. I have a little Blu-ray Steelbook collection. I may do a video on that at some point, but I have on Blu-ray Steelbook, I have Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, Scott Pilgrim, and Baby Driver, and I really love Baby Driver as well because the presentation and the editing and the use of music in that movie really was unique, and I thought it was just really cool and of a caliber that I hadn't really seen in any other movie up to that point. It was really like fun experience, and it was really well choreographed, and it was really well shot and really well presented and really well acted, and I just really liked Baby Driver a lot. And Last Night in Soho, as a follow up to that, I'll talk about it. I'll start off very positively, and I'll talk about the things I liked in the movie, and then I'll get into things that I would ding, and then I'd talk about a few things that only I would think of, and that aren't really like positives and negatives, but are just kind of, and aren't going to influence the score that I give the movie, but are just kind of little weird things. And so, to talk about the movie's strengths, it's very well presented. That's, of course, like the best part of all the modern Edgar Wright movies. It seems to be, as I've been suggesting, a kind of tandem between which movies are just as well written as they are presented, and I think Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz are those, and which are better presented than they are written. And I think that The World's End and perhaps even Baby Driver fall into that category where you're watching them more for style rather than substance. And Scott Pilgrim is kind of a perfect middle thing where that's kind of the most quotable, well written thing, and it's also insanely well presented. That might just be like the ultimate Edgar Wright movie. I don't know. But Last Night in Soho has an interesting script. It's an interesting plot line in that it's about a teenage girl who goes off to university and attempts to be a fresher and go to Freshers Week and go to parties and live in halls with her roommates, and then immediately realizes that it's not for her and she hates it and she hates everyone. Everybody seems to hate her for no reason, and so she goes off by herself and just kind of lives in this apartment flat on off of Gooch Street in Soho, and has visions of being Anya Taylor-Joy at night in the 60s. And apart from that last part, that was pretty much my university experience as well, and so I related quite a bit to the main character. um, and the film is just the score is, as you can imagine, it's just 60s hits one after the other, and that's all really great. It's all scored very well. The main performances by Thomasin McKenzie and Anya Taylor-Joy are really good, and Matt Smith is in the movie. He doesn't have as substantial or as ranged a role as you might think. He's kind of a one note, you know, asshole character. I'll talk about the plot in a little bit more. And it's basically, I'm not going to spoil anything that the trailers didn't show or suggest, and even I didn't even see all of the trailers for this film, and I'm really not going to spoil things unnecessarily. But the main themes of the movie are like mental health and sexual assault, which I was not expecting in this like dream-like fantasyland impression that the marketing was giving me. It's really a film where Thomasin McKenzie is struggling the entire time with like visions that she's having, but it's a bit more grounded than that. It's not just like, oh, I'm having these magical visions and nobody believes me. It's like she's experiencing, and she's been known to experience severe mental health issues, throughout her like adolescence at least. And she does not have any help or support for that in this movie, and so she just has a terrible time the entire time. I mean, it's kind of like a horror movie trope of like a main character that's kind of got something off, mentally or wrong mentally, and then they're kind of secluded, they end up by themselves, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. It's like that, and I think it's like handled appropriately sensitively. I don't think it's inappropriately handled. Like, I was thinking of the movie Split from M. Night Shyamalan, which also has Anya Taylor-Joy in it. And I feel like there was a moment in that movie where it tried to address the theme of sexual assault, and I did not think that it did a very good, or like, did not handle that subject matter with like the delicacy that it warrants. But I can't have that criticism for this film. I think this film um, kind of dealt with its subject matter very delicately and very appropriately. And as I may have mentioned earlier, the screening that I was at was a Q&A screening with Edgar Wright, and so I got to hear more of his takes on the film and his thoughts while making the film. And he mentioned that, oh yes, when people, kind of go back and they think about the 60s or the 70s, then they kind of call them the good old days, and there can be a lot of nostalgia, but a lot of terrible things happened, particularly to women, and still happen today in some cases. But the film kind of, that's what it's about, and it's about not glossing over, like the magical swinging 60s. It's also about kind of skewering them. And it's like, if Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was like, he didn't say this, I'm saying this. If Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was like the shiny, nothing bad ever happens, Sharon Tate didn't die kind of world, this is kind of the opposite of that, where it's like, oh, it's the 60s, it's so nice. Oh my god, everyone's just a creep all the time, and they just do horrible things to women all the time. And it can cause the movie to feel a little bit, one note, where there's just kind of scenes that are the same, where it's just Anya Taylor-Joy goes out or has a conversation with Matt Smith, and she's like, I don't want to do this, and he's like, you have to, you got to do your job, all the other girls are doing it, what makes you so special? and Thomas and Mackenzie will like have a freak out scene about Anya Taylor-Joy that she'll see somewhere, and then we'll go have another day and experience the same thing, and it's effective in terms of building up like the tension, and you're expecting it to go somewhere, and it does, but it can make the experience slightly repetitive at points. It's not a major thing, but it's a point. In terms of the look of the film, it's very pretty. Like, there's a point where the first time you switch over to Anya Taylor-Joy in the 60s, the film gets very colourful. But up to that point, it's set in the present day, and it's just the main character, Thomas and Mackenzie, going to university at the London College of Fashion, and the color scheme is very it's not washed out, but it's kind of greyish. It's not super duper colourful. But the second you get into that 60s era, everything is very neon and very colourful, and the soundtrack kind of comes into full swing. And in fact, the audio presentation, I saw this in a Dolby Atmos theatre. And Edgar Wright mentioned this as well, that intentionally, up until that point in the film, the presentation is just kind of stereo. It's just kind of front facing, and only when you go into that 60s world do all the speakers in the auditorium get utilized, and it becomes a full, immersive fantasy experience. And I thought that was quite cool. It was pretty effective, and there's a lot of like whooshing camera movements and steady cam shots, and some great stuff that happens in those 60s sequences that were pretty creative. I wouldn't say the presentation was as ambitiously crazy as like a Scott Pilgrim or Baby Driver, like the kind of, crazy hyper fast editing that Edgar Wright does. He does not do in this film. And it's fine, it's a choice, it's an artistic choice, and it's whatever he does is fine as long as it's effective. And not to say that there are no pretty shots or tight edits in the film, there are, but it's not, if you're expecting like some super high energy fun fest, like this is not that. It's more quiet and, a bit more serious than you might have thought from the trailers. As I say, from the subject matter, it's kind of not fun. Like it gets really not, you're not woohooing, at the things that are happening in this horror movie. You're kind of just going like, oh, that's awful. Oh, I hope somebody helps this girl. But apart from like one friend she has, the sad thing about the people who she has in this movie, the main character has in this movie, is that even though they want to help her, they're not up to it. You get the impression watching this that you're like, this girl needs serious professional help, which she has not gotten and is not getting and has never had. And it's kind of sad to watch her just suffer throughout the whole thing. At least with Anya Taylor-Joy's character, I'm not going to spoil anything, but she seems a bit more in command of her situation in a way that Thomas and Mackenzie's character, Eloise, doesn't get to be. And so on that level, it's kind of a bummer. but but presentationally, the film is good as you would expect from an Edgar Wright film. And in terms of other elements of the film that I specifically noticed that I would, I guess, critique, some of these are very, or not even critique, but just kind of notice and observe, is that the one critique I do have is the jump scares in this movie, where being a horror movie, you would expect, or you not necessarily expect, but you would allow for or factor in the fact that there might be scares in this movie, and jump scare is one kind of scare. And there are ways to do jump scares. There's showing you something scary in a way that makes you go, oh god, and there's playing a really loud, screeching noise and showing something in your face, just kind of hard cutting and just kind of, being headache inducing. And unfortunately, this film with its jump scares does the latter. I really don't like when horror films do this. It's not scary. It's not, effective in terms of filmmaking. I mean, if, you just had a black screen, then you just had a big screeching sound, you wouldn't say that's a really effective piece of horror filmmaking. You would just say that's annoying. And it is just annoying every time it happens, and it happens a few times in the movie. It's not like good when like Jordan Peele does it. It's not good when like the It movies did them recently. It's not cool when they do it. It's not cool when Edgar Wright does it. And he doesn't need to do it because there's plenty of imagery in this film that is perfectly scary. It's perfectly horror-tastic and doesn't require the use of jump scares or loud screeching sounds. Sorry, I've got a hair coming into my mouth. A loud screeching sound, and yet it happens a few times in the movie, and I did not care for that. In terms of other things I liked, I did love just the location of the movie because I live in London and I have all my life, and especially in the last 8 years that I've been kind of running around as a student myself, it kind of took me back to my university times. And for example, there's one scene where the Thomas and Mackenzie's character goes to a Halloween party, and it's like I didn't get to have a Halloween party in my university because like my student union protested it for cultural appropriation or whatever. And so I remember like back when I was a fresher, getting makeup and all the rest done with like friends for the Halloween party, and then we got this email saying the Halloween party's not happening. And so there's a scene in this movie where they say, "Let's go to the student union Halloween party," and it was kind of like a Halloween party that I didn't get to have myself. And so things like that. My university's library is in the movie. So there's a scene in a library, university library in this movie. That's my university library. And it's where I spend a lot of my time in university. As you can tell, I'm a very, outgoing person and spend a lot of time with other people and, don't just stay home or don't just stay in auditoriums and watch movies all the time by myself. But that things like that in the movie really connected with me. And of course, the whole like rest of the world, central London. I mean, like the way there's plenty of scenes of Thomas and Mackenzie going through like back streets and places on like Carnaby Street, on Oxford Circus, on Piccadilly Circus, all places that I go to myself and walk around all the time, just naturally in my day-to-day commuting and exploring. And so it's just kind of neat to see that in a movie. I mean, most films aren't even set in England, let alone in Soho. And so it's kind of the first time that I've seen like a main character in like a Hollywood film walk past like a Pizza Express. Like one of the main locations in this film is a bar that's next to a Pizza Express, and if you live in England, you know what Pizza Express is. And it's just kind of funny just to see like Pizza Express in a movie. And there's more impressive shots. Like there's one of like there's this big crossing on Oxford Street, and it's kind of like the I'm forgetting the name. There's a crossing in like Tokyo, and you see it in Lost in Translation of Scarlett Johansson crossing the street, and you kind of get one of those with Thomas and Mackenzie in this big wide shot showing the whole four-way crosswalk. And there's stuff like that in the movie that's really cool. And so just the locations, the sense of setting and place in the movie, I really enjoyed. And Thomas and Mackenzie's performance and Anya Taylor-Joy's performance, if I hadn't mentioned, are really strong in the movie. However, I feel that the film didn't have that much of a narrative substance in terms of it has its theme. It's a horror movie, so you're not expecting like that much in terms of character drama and development. Lots of them are situational, where characters suffering with something in the beginning, and then they kind of have to overcome them at the end, and that's fine. And that's what this movie has. But it's not super substantial, and as I say, it gets a little repetitive. And so this pure narrative for me, and the characters and how they're fleshed out were kind of so to me. I think Thomas and Mackenzie's great, and she puts a lot into the character, and she carries the movie. She's in every single scene in the movie. There's nothing that happens in this movie that she's not driving and she's not in. So she's great, but in terms of like the narrative, it's not the most engaging like murder mystery, or it's not the most substantial script I've ever experienced in a film. Um, in terms of like odd little things that I'm going to nitpick because that's just what I'm like, and I had to really stop myself from asking them to Edgar Wright when we were at the Q&A, were number one, the character does not listen to any modern music, she only listens to 60s music, but she has a pair of Beats headphones that she listens to all of her music on throughout the film. And I don't know why she has Beats headphones because for someone who doesn't like modern music, it would make 60s music sound pretty muddy and bad. Like I know the new Beats headphones are good, but it's just this character seemed like the type. She has like this old beat up phone as well. I thought at the beginning of the film because this is the stuff I think of when I see tech in film, is that like, oh, maybe she got like an iPad for uni and the Beats headphones were free, but she doesn't, and she just has this like old Android phone. It's like I don't even know what brand it is. It's some like knockoff. It looks like I don't even know what the OS was trying to be, and so, but she just has these Beats headphones, and she seems the type that would have these like retro, or at least like alternative, like grotto, SR80 headphones with like maybe a DAC that's like a portable DAC she plugs into her phone or something to listen to like music really authentically, because she does listen to vinyl records and carries around her player and everything, so she cares about that. I just don't know if she's enjoying the audio experience as much on her Beats headphones as she would with another pair of headphones. I mean, I guess it's product placement, but you kind of have to make it appropriate to the character, and I don't think that the Beats headphones were. Um, Also, and they're all going to be like this, all the little nitpicks that I have are this stupid. Um, there's a point where her friend in the film refers to where they are at as North London, saying that he's coming from South London, but nobody would ever refer to like Piccadilly Circus or Soho or where the London College of Fashion is as North London. There is a North London, but where this movie is set is Central London, and so that I thought was a weird thing. For it's a joke in the film and it's funny, but for Edgar Wright, it's pretty surprising considering that he's lived in London 25 years and he would refer to Soho as North London because it's not North London. There's several points in this film where characters almost get hit by a taxi at a really, really fast speed, and these are scenes that are set in the present day. And as somebody who's been outside, been in the back streets a lot, taxis do not drive fast when they I know it's a horror movie and the characters have to almost die a bunch, and one side character does get injured as a result of getting hit by a taxi at very, very high speed walking out of a pub. Taxis do not drive fast, outside of pubs. Taxis drive very slowly. The speed limit in like all London streets pretty much now is 20 miles an hour. So it's just not like New York or another film where that could happen. I thought it was pretty unrealistic that a taxi would just be zooming through like back streets and streets where there were pubs and drunk people walking around. Taxis like on those streets they go at like 5 miles an hour. So I thought that was a bit weird. And what else? The CGI in the film, there's quite a few special effects shots, and I don't think it looked amazing. Like it looked pretty stylized. Like the film wasn't trying to go for like an ultra real style. Like when glass is breaking, they're not trying to like get the characters like cut up and gross. It's not like it's a bit more like Suspiria 1977 rather than Suspiria 2018 or 17 when the Luca Guadagnino reboot came out. So it's a bit more kind of stylized and prettyized, and so I can maybe forgive that and overlook it, but it doesn't look like super duper realistic CGI when there are special effect shots. Um, Other things, like at one point her friend asks her to pour him 3 pints of Guinness beer, and she pours a different beer, and she's working as a bartender, and I thought that was really bad customer service, and no one ever addresses that, and he doesn't say like, hey, that's not the beer that I ordered, And so it's just kind of weird. And I thought that maybe the tap that she was pouring from was just branded differently and it was that beer. But then later in the film, a character does ask her for the brand of beer that she poured the other guy, and he asks for a different brand, and she does pour him that from the same tap. And I'm like, okay, so that is a tap that has that different beer in it. That's not Guinness. And so I thought that was, as I say, she's a very bad bartender, and that's a big problem with the film, and it's cost the film several points on my IMDb. And um, I think that's about everything that I experienced. And so yeah, that's my experience watching Last Night in Soho. I enjoyed the movie well enough. It's competently shot. It's very well acted by Thomas and Mackenzie in particular. It's the soundtrack to the movie is like energetic and fun and cool. The subject matter of the film kind of felt one note throughout a lot of it and quite repetitive. And even though the um, subject matter warrants being kind of delved into, and not just being like a one scene shock value thing, it didn't make for the most engaging narrative of an Edgar Wright film that I've ever seen. And overall, I would give the film, and I have given the film on my IMDb, a 6 out of 10. I can't believe that I think I might have just been able to record the whole review in one take, which would make editing this very easy. I Yeah, I'm looking at my notes here. That's why I'm looking in the corner of the screen. I have some notes here. And that's everything. Thank you for watching. I'm going to end the video before it gets long. I don't know how long this video is already, but I'm sure it's like at least 10 minutes long. And I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you.